forced me into this 10-year-long friendship. So
that sucks for me.
Philly's overlooked. This city is absolutely awesome.
Hopefully someone wants to listen to this. Maybe it's only one, maybe it'll be 1,000, maybe it'll be 1,000,000, who knows?
Philly's definitely dirty and grimy.
Oh, we are dirty
it doesn't
and we are grimy.
This is Join or Cry. Philly, let's get silly. Welcome to Join or Cry. I'm your host, Grant Horn, joined alongside the one, the only,
Carly Potomac.
Let's get into it. I know you're all sitting there and you've meandered through the podcast forest, or you've clicked on something and now you're on your daily stroll, or you're folding laundry, or you're doing something, and you find yourself listening to this and you're probably thinking, what am I wasting my time? Why am I wasting my time? And why are these two degenerates trying to start a podcast when this space is already so watered down? Well, I'll tell you, everyone, this is a hidden gem. This is going to be something that you do want to join every weekend, or you're going to be crying because you're missing out. Carly, tell them why we are doing this. Tell them about us. Tell them a little bit about who we are.
Yeah, so ultimately we decided to make this podcast on the subway, actually, when we were just driving back from watching the Sixers game. Grant has just recently joined me in this lovely city of brotherly love. We've known each other now for, I don't even know how many years it's been. I think we met junior year of high school.
Yeah, God, that's like, what, 10
Forever
years
ago
now? Yeah, it's literally 10 years ago. That's crazy.
Yeah, so we've been friends for quite some time. We went to college together as well. And then we've made our way back, and he had ultimately followed me to my city, and now he lives here. So
yeah, it's one of those things where it's kind of like the phrase or the thing that everyone says from the Hot Ones take, right? Like, Who would have thought? Not me. Because genuinely, when I met Carly back, we worked at this restaurant in high school, and for those of you who don't know Carly, I'll paint a picture of who she is, because this is clearly just audio. She is maybe 5'3" on a good day.
I'm 5 feet tall, but thank you.
Okay. Oh, wow. I was being very generous. Okay, exactly. So she is this short Asian girl with an absolute, like, infinite amount of spunk, honestly. And working at this restaurant with her, I was like, please get me away from this woman as fast as possible. Like, she is the woat. Like, leave me alone. And then me and my best friend went to school at JMU, and guess who decided to follow us down there? Yeah, you guessed it, Carly did. So lo and behold, she forced me into this 10-year-long friendship. So me getting back at her was moving to Philly and then saying, hey, I guess you have an idea. Let's start a podcast, and this will be some sort of adventure. But let me ask this then, Carly. Let's go into, why are we doing this?
At this point, I would say that we are doing this because we both obviously love to talk and hear ourselves talk, and then we both actually do listen to podcasts, and I feel like they're, again, honestly pretty oversaturated at this point in time, but not necessarily in the Philadelphia market. I think that a lot of podcasts that people listen to are based out of LA or New York or something like that, but I just really feel like we can bring something very fresh, and being in our mid-20s now, we are both 26 years old. I don't know. Hopefully someone wants to listen to this. Maybe it's only one, maybe it'll be 1,000, maybe it'll be 1,000,000, who knows? But I just think that we have a lot of thoughts that we want to kind of get out there, and hopefully people want to listen.
Yeah, I mean, going off which, I think too, there is without a doubt a gaping hole in the addressable podcast market, and we are trying to plug it with some very high quality, exciting, controversial at some points opinions, and it's all going to culminate in a very interesting podcast that talks a lot about being a young professional, dating as a young professional, going after your goals, trying to get to where you want to be by the time you're 30, right?
Just navigating life post-grad mostly.
Yeah.
Kind of figuring out what the... oh, damn. What the hell we're all doing here.
And I think, too, this is one of the points Carly and I were talking about when we thought about this podcast, was that so many people are going through life thinking they have it all figured out, or at least acting like they have it all figured out, when in reality, they have no clue whatsoever. Like, their mind is a vast void of emptiness, and they're just putting on such a good facade. Like, I'll admit to myself that I'd like to think on the surface I look like, oh, here's this guy who like has his life put together and he knows where he wants to go and what he wants to do and what his career goals are and what his personal goals are. But deep down, and not to get all like emotional and like treat this as like my trauma.
No, not already.
But like,
not the trauma.
Definitely have done a ton of self-reflection and realize that although I think sometimes I have the answers, I do not. And I think a lot of people feel that way. And that's why Carly and I really want to put our heads together here and try to answer as many questions and try to tackle some of these topics that we know people like us are definitely going through and like seeing at this age and in this part of their life.
No, I completely agree. Hopefully you guys can relate to some, if not all, of the things that we discussed during this journey. So I guess that brings us where we are filming this, which we already had obviously talked about, which is going to be in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We actually both live in Center City. Grant could probably not have moved closer to me, honestly. We're about 2.5 blocks away from each other, so that's great.
It's actually fantastic. It's funny because when I was looking at apartments to move into this city, I specifically put a pin on Carly's location. I was like, all right, how, like, without literally moving in next door, how physically close can I get to be like that much more annoying and like that much more involved, where like I'll literally walk on Broad Street or something and see her and be like, oh, hey, like, look at this city of 1.5 million people. It's so small. Like, so doing that is fun. But I think too, what is interesting about Philly, right? Specifically like on the East Coast, we talk about just addressable like market, and we talk about, oh, so many people are based in LA or San Diego or New York, you know, and so like, or let's just say like Miami too, like Philly is so overlooked. I think it's also overlooked too, because if you look at like just, let's say the Northeast, right? And I guess it's more so mid-Atlantic, where you have Washington, D.C., the capital of the U.S. and all the politics and the swampiness that goes on down there. And then you have New York, which is, in my opinion, an absolute cesspool. And no offense to anyone that lives in New York and loves that. Like, that's your vibe, whatever. Like, I grew up in New Jersey, and going into the city when you're a kid, like, okay, cool, this is fun. Statue of Liberty, Empire State Building, like, all that. And I get, like, that is not genuine New York, right? Like, actually, about a month ago, I visited a friend who lives on the Upper East Side, and we went into, like, Central Park to play pickleball, because that's what everyone's doing nowadays, right? And in that moment, I was like, okay, I get the allure that people enjoy New York for, and that's sort of like, wow, there's absolute creatures here. But if you want to like compare creatures of New York to some of the people I have seen in like the first 2 weeks of living in this city, like when I walk outside, it does not even compare. Like, there is absolute characters. Like, I'm gonna have to think of like some names to call these like individuals, which I will think of, because I don't want to just be like, oh, they're characters, they're creatures. Like, I'm gonna think of some very creative term to start calling these individuals that will definitely stick. Point is though, like, Philly is overlooked. This city is absolutely awesome. Like, yes, is it dirty? Sure. Is it grime? But I think from living in cities like Washington, D.C., from visiting New York all the time, from going out to Chicago, because like a bunch of my family lives out there, I think Philly to me brings so much of all of that like together in a really good mix, where like, unlike New York, again, it's 1.5 million people in this city. Maybe actually it's almost probably 1.6 at this point. But like, that to me is awesome, because it's ginormous, but it is not overbearing like New York, where it is like you are just in a sea of people, and again, like I said, for lack of a better term, just like it feels like a cesspool, just dirty, grimy. Like that's great. Like Philly's definitely dirty and grimy, but like
we are dirty
it doesn't
and we are
feel
grimy, but...
to the point that New York is. And then DC like is just so, it's not small, but when you compare it's 600,000 to 700,000, you're literally doubling in size to like that move, at least for me, from DC up to Philly.
Right.
And DC just doesn't feel like a city because of like the skyline and the way the city is structured architecturally. Again, fun place to go out in, cool place to live in, especially like when I first graduated, but really excited for living in like a proper city that is Philly and just the absolute culture that is in this city. Because in DC, sure, you have sports teams and things like that. In New York, yeah, you've got sports teams. Like New York, you have the Yankees and the Mets. You have the Jets and the Giants, right? Philly, it's like, these are our teams and we are going to support them in and out, day out. Like they could be, and what's funny, like, bless their hearts this year. I don't know what's been put in the water here in Philly.
Something happened this year that the sports in Philly have been absolutely insane. I have never particularly loved baseball by any means, but I got in there during the World Series. I was like huge into the Phillies, loved just like the camaraderie that brought everyone in the city together, like rooting for something. And don't get me wrong, again, we are both from Jersey. I am actually a New York Giants fan. Yeah, so that sucks for me. But just watching everyone really come together for these games, like especially how well the Eagles are doing, and like the fans have been in amazing moods and uplifted spirits, since normally I feel like they have a bad rep of being like one of the most obnoxious fans probably in the country. I would say Eagles fans, I feel like, are notorious for being just really just over the top.
Yeah, I think what's interesting, like you mentioned that, like everyone rags and dogs on Eagles fans, like, oh, they're the, like, really just Philly sports fans doing, like, oh, they're so mean, they're terrible, like they're the worst. But then you come and you live here and you partly you kind of realize why they're so mean. They're like, yeah, no, like my life sucks, so like my team better be good. And then when the team sucks as well, you're like, I'm just miserable, so I'm just gonna take my hate out on other people. So it is nice. I think it's funny too, when I was moving into apartments, one of the apartments I looked at had a special because the Phillies were in the World Series, and basically said, if the Phillies win, we'll take another $1,000 like off. And part of me was like, oh, that's pretty enticing. They had just won game one. I was like, oh, maybe. I didn't end up going with that place, and thank goodness I didn't, because they lost. But really fun, again, how just the city is so involved sports-wise and really cares about their sports teams.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. It's definitely fun to watch and fun to be around. And since we live in such a great location and we're able to just hop on the subway and get to the stadiums, it's so fun. And like, Grant has not had the pleasure of going to Xfinity Live yet, but that is definitely one of the places that I have on our list of things to do. But yeah.
Yeah, I guess the last thing we're really talking about is then, like, when is this going down?
Yes.
And this is going to drop every week, every Thursday. It'll be, I guess, just Thursday at 12. I don't know. I guess that's one final detail we haven't picked out of when we're going to drop these every week. So, like, this first episode, we're just going to drop it because we want to get some feedback. We want to know what y'all's thoughts are on this.
Y'all, as in the two of you probably listening,
exactly.
If that, including our parents.
Well, I don't know if I ever would want my parents. It's very similar to, like, I know once we start getting into the nit and grit of some of the topics and things we're going to talk about, there is no chance in, like, hell freezing over that I want my parents to listen to this.
Craig and Tina, yeah, maybe not.
I mean, I will say, it's not to the extent that Alex Cooper call her daddy. Like, if I was that woman's father, I would be absolutely mortified. I would be like, here she is talking about Gluck Gluck 3000. And it's like, bro, like, you do you, girl. Go get that bag. Like, good on you for, like, building that brand. Because, again, it's a proper podcast brand. But yeah, if I was covering topics to that extent and that in detailed depth, I would not want any semblance of a chance that my parents or anyone that I love would listen to it.
That's fair. That's a good point. Yeah, so I guess we kind of just need to decide what time on Thursdays, but I think that Thursdays are going to be the day. What else?
I guess the last thing too is like we are going to have a line open for you all. So if you ever want a question answered, you want our 2 cents, not that many of you probably even want to discuss whatever you're going to discuss.
I'll just send us questions and.
But yeah, maybe we'll send ourselves fake questions to start. Oh, user 235XY says, "Hey guys, like," I'd have to come up with a more intricate username, like Big Daddy 420 says, "Hey guys, can you please help me? I've lost my girlfriend and need advice on winning her back.
I need to find her."
Yes. Point is, if you want to write in, you want a question answered, you want some advice, either send it to our Gmail, which is just join.or.cry@gmail.com, or just DM us on the Instagram. We're going to be pretty
DMs
quick.
are open.
Our DMs are wide open right now. Honestly, maybe if you send the first question, we'll consider sending some merchandise your way.
Ooh, yes, that would be fun.
So get on it. We can prove it out. We'll post and show exactly who the first person was to send us a question or send something into our DMs. Definitely.
It can really be anything.
I mean, honestly, slide into our DMs because our DMs are as gaping as a hole as the addressable market that we're going after with this podcast. It is wide open. So please flood them.
We are so free. And then I guess, do we want to talk about how we came up with the title of the pod or the theme,
I mean, I guess we can round it out with that, sure.
Yeah, so I think that it actually started with Grant making the logo because like I mentioned, we brought this up on the subway as one does. And then he literally went home and he worked on a logo for us. I didn't really know how seriously we were taking this. And then he made one and it looks great. It basically, you'll see it if you visit our Instagram or our YouTube channel, but it's the Liberty Bell, a play on the Liberty Bell, but with a Pong cup, so like a red Solo cup instead of the bell. And then there's a snake around it. So that kind of gave me the inspiration of, I actually originally wanted to call it Join or Die, kind of obviously because of, who even said Join or Die? Was that Benjamin Franklin?
It's a political cartoon. I forget
Not
who
Benjamin
did
Franklin.
it. No, it was a political cartoon that was drawn, but it was done in Philly around the revolution and setting our independence back in 1776. Obviously, that took place here in Philadelphia. And there's
what should have been the nation's capital, but
honestly, better that it's not. But anywho, we took that idea, and then Join or Die just sound very
too intense.
A little intense, and I think as well, I mean, death is inevitable, sure, but we didn't want to have such a morbid title, join or we're gonna die. Like Join or Cry is join, and there's gonna be a lot of tears along the way. Like I would be lying if I said I didn't have a slight tear here and there over the last 4 years of my life from when I graduated college to where I am now. And I mean, I think that's just a fact. As many people grow up, people cry. It happens.
People cry. I don't cry very often. I can't really speak on Grant and what he does in his spare time living alone, but
I was gonna say, I don't cry in front of people, but there's definitely moments all right, maybe I'm by myself, no one's looking, can I shed a tear? Okay, I can let this one out.
The shower is my safe place. No one can hear.
I can attest to Carly not crying though. I actually think I've seen Carly cry maybe once over, again, our 10-year friendship.
Nice.
And it wasn't over a guy. I forget what it was. But Carly is a very brick wall. Like I said, it's funny, when I described her, and now this short 5-foot Asian girl, dark hair, dark eyes, that is, like I said, a absolute brick wall and just does not let anyone take over her emotions.
Wow,
it's pretty
thank
impressive.
You so much, Grant.
Especially
that was really
coming
nice.
from someone who I wear my heart on my sleeve without a doubt, and I will be the first one to admit that.
He totally does.
Carly is the absolute opposite of that.
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of also what would make this podcast, or what will make this podcast interesting, is just our personalities differing so much, yet for some reason we just keep holding on to the friendship because we have like a very interesting relationship that you really have to experience, and you will listen as you continue this podcast with us, kind of what that's all about, and the differing of our, like, everything. We basically are complete opposites, and like physically obviously opposites as well. I guess I'll just tell you what Grant looks like if you're curious by any means. So Grant is a white male, kind of imagine a Chad Brad situation. Grant, come on. He's a white male, 6 foot tall, he says. I think he might be 5'11", but whatever. Potato.
More than happy to take out the measuring stick.
Okay, great. Brown hair, brown eyes. Just imagine a guy in a frat.
Just imagine every other man on the planet, and that is me. I am nothing special. I am just like everyone else. I wish Carly would have had fun with that and be like, yeah, Grant's this 400-pound, heavily set Indian man. That would have been, could you imagine? Like, I mean, I don't think the voices would have lined at all.
No, probably
everyone would
not.
Like, there's no way that voice is coming from someone like that. But
yeah, I'm just excited to be here, and I mean, I don't even know. I think that once we actually get into it and like talk about actual topics, that hopefully you guys find them interesting enough, and if when this goes well, we might even bring this to the YouTube and actually do videos. But until then, we just get our voices.
It'll be fun. It'll be a good journey. It'll be a good way for me and Carly to have discount therapy with each other. But like I said, definitely cover some really fun and exciting topics that, again, I think a lot of people cover, but we're going to do it in a pretty unique way, being that you will get both a male and female perspective. And we'd like to think we're pretty down-to-earth, regular, normal people, but who knows? By the way we go about some of these topics, you may think these people are
the
absolutely
most outlandish characters.
I don't know if I would take any advice from them. If like they gave me a piece of paper, I'd be like, crumpled up, throw it into a fire, like the Grinch, like don't touch it with a 10-foot pole. Like please leave me alone. So anyway, we appreciate you guys taking the time, guys, girls, whoever, whatever you identify as, taking the time, listen to the podcast, joining us for this episode 0 pilot, 5 W's type deal. Carly, any other closing thoughts?
Just that our first episode is actually live on Spotify and YouTube already. So if you guys even enjoyed this a little bit or a lot, feel free to go check that one out. And we look forward to seeing you guys there.
Absolutely. Appreciate you all joining in. We'll see you all next Thursday when you either join
or cry.